Hi everyone, today I want to talk about leaderboards in Diablo 4 and what they could look like. So we don't have any real official information regarding this yet, but I actually did have the chance to sit down with the devs a while ago and I spoke to them about it. And they didn't really have like a clear picture to give me, but it seems like they are definitely intent on introducing leaderboards in the future in the post-launch patch, most likely in Season 1, I imagine. So when the game launches in June, it's going to be in like only a non-seasonal state. And then a few weeks or maybe a few months maximum after it, there's going to be the Season 1 launch. And this is where the real competition will start, I guess. So this is when we're probably going to see, you know, all the season journey stuff and leaderboards and these kind of things. And where people can actually, you know, take all the knowledge they have gathered and try to apply it to become like, you know, top of the leaderboards. I think a good place to look at is actually Diablo 3, which has quite a lot of different leaderboards. And I believe that similar systems could be applied to Diablo 4 to also introduce leaderboards in that game. So I kind of want to discuss the ideas a little bit, you know, get this ball rolling basically, maybe hear some of your ideas if you have any. And just like, let's see what this conversation will lead to, I guess. Because it seems like even the developers are not 100% sure on that topic yet. And we can, you know, maybe influence the choices a little bit with something that the community actually wants. So speaking of Diablo 3, I think there are some obvious choices that we have here that can be transferred into Diablo 4 to create a leaderboard system. That kind of makes sense. So the way this works in Diablo 3 is that you have different game modes. So there's like the non-season, there's hardcore non-season, there's season, and there's season hardcore. And you have leaderboard for each class. And these days also for each set. And then you have like the 2, 3, and 4 player stuff here. So this is kind of like the main leaderboards of each of the classes. Everyone who's playing Diablo 3 right now is familiar with the system. So you have the different leaderboards. You can see the clears, the times, the tier. You can even open the profile and see exactly what people used. So I think this is overall a pretty solid foundation for a leaderboard system in Diablo 4 as well. Now, I know that in Diablo 4, there's actually the option to have like a private profile. So I expect that, for example, you will not be able to actually inspect everyone's gear and everyone's build. And this can also, you know, create this kind of like, you know, mystery scenario where people can try to cook up some really crazy secret builds and try to take rank one of them. That's going to be pretty cool. This is actually what happened in Diablo 3 as well in the early seasons until they introduced this feature where you can actually check out a character's build that was placed on a leaderboard. So back in the early days, this is, for example, also how, you know, my stream kind of like had its one big breakthrough is when I made the Boar Lightning Demon Hunter build in Season 1. And I took rank 1 of it way back. And this was a secret build basically that I played that was just better than any other build. These days, I gotta say, public profiles or not, it does not matter too much. But either way, it can be quite interesting, I guess. Especially with like, you know, people coming out of some insane builds when the game launches and we have lots of things to discover. But in general, we also have to see that the game systems work a bit differently in Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. So in Diablo 3, we have this Greater Rift system and we have, you know, a tier that you can select. You have a randomly generated map, a randomly generated monster type, elites, and the boss and the pylons. So in general, there's a lot of RNG involved in Diablo 3 in particular. So when you try to do a clear, you have to do the so-called fishing. And you have to try to get like a really good map. You know, this is one of the best layouts here. There's like a bunch of good pylons. You try to get some of the better monsters, and then you try to get a boss that you can actually kill. And all of this stuff does not actually exist in Diablo 4. So while the RNG is very high in Diablo 3, it's actually very low in Diablo 4. Which is actually way more suitable for a leaderboard type system like this. And in addition to that, we also don't have infinite grinding in Diablo 4. So right now in Diablo 3, we have the big issue that on the very high ranks, you usually have mostly the very high Paragon players. You see here, for example, 9.7k and then 7.4k. And then there's my rank here, 3.2. And then there's another guy with 2, and there's 5, and there's 2 again. And these kind of things. And this kind of like pollutes all the different leaderboards, so to say, with people that have mostly just grinded a lot more paragons and have, you know, just outgrinded everyone else without actually necessarily, you know, trying harder than other people or being a better player than other people. And with the limited character power that we're gonna have in Diablo 4, having leaderboards like this actually makes a lot more sense. But they also have to work a bit differently, I believe. So for example, when you look at Nightmare Dungeons, I think this could be kind of like this one big Greater Rift-like leaderboard system that we might see in Diablo 4. And if you look at the list of the Nightmare Dungeons here right now, so this is like the highest tier of Nightmare Dungeons, from the highest like difficulty tier basically. There's a total of 20 dungeons, and they're supposed to like rotate season after season. So there's a lot of dungeons in the game, like 100 something, and 20 of them are going to be the Nightmare Dungeons for this difficulty mode in a particular season. So you actually have a system, I think, that would represent something much more like Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft, a lot more than the Greater Rift system in Diablo 3, where you have relatively fixed dungeons, they have a fixed boss, fixed objectives, but there is some RNG involved in the exact layout, in the exact distribution of monsters, in what the elites have, for example. But there are also like these kind of like, yeah, fixed cornerstones of the dungeon, basically, that represent a certain challenge. So I think this could actually be very interesting to combine this Diablo 3 Greater Rift system with something that we see in WoW, where you get like a rating for each dungeon that you complete, depending on the highest tier that you have completed it. So for example, some of these dungeons are going to be harder than others. And you know, if your build maybe can push to, let's say, tier 100 at the very high end, and you know, you have like a really good run, maybe you can do a tier 100 in like the easiest dungeon out of this list. You know, let's say just like this one, for example. But you know, the next one is going to be, you know, filled with much harder elites in general, much harder monsters in general, has like more difficult objectives. And you might not actually be able to achieve a tier 100 on this one, but just a tier 85, for example. So in order to prevent everyone from just farming the same dungeon over and over to try to achieve like, you know, the top clear, you know, the highest clear, because a certain dungeon is way easier than another, I think that every dungeon needs to count into a certain like rating or score that all combine for like the overall leaderboard rank that you're gonna have. So that you can't leave out any of those dungeons, and you have to achieve a good tier, a good clear in all of them. Obviously, there could be leaderboards for each single dungeon. I think that would make sense. But in terms of like, for example, the class ranks, so if you say like, you know, the #1 rogue or the #1 barb or whatever, you know, this needs to be some kind of combined score, in my opinion, so that you actually have to, so to say, master all of the dungeons. Now, obviously in Diablo 4, there is still some RNG involved, for example, with the Nightmare Dungeon Afflictions. So there's going to be some random affixes that are going to be in each round. There's also going to be, for example, random shrines and these kind of things. But I think that in general, with the RNG being rather low, and you have the choice, you know, to run a certain tier of a certain dungeon, you can, you know, craft those sigils or find those sigils and then decide which one to do. You always have a bit of like an idea of what you're going to face compared to Diablo 3, where you just fish and fish and fish until you get something good. And at the same time would still preserve this kind of pushing experience that we have in Diablo 3, where you actually, you know, take your build that you have grinded for, that you have set up with the best gear and good paragons, and then try to achieve like a certain tier or a certain rank. And it's kind of like a journey to get there. You know, you have to try many times. You have to fish for a good rift. You're going to fail even good rifts because it was not good enough. And you're going to try another good one until eventually you get your clear and you play it well and you have it done. And I think something like this will also happen in Diablo 4 with kind of like this, you know, this kind of like goal that you try to accomplish, let's say the tier 100 in each of the dungeons, and you try them over and over until you actually get a good run in order to finish it. Now, I've talked a lot about these Nightmare Dungeons now. We're going to have to see how exactly it will play out, how difficult those tiers are going to be. But in general, I expect that the Nightmare Dungeons are going to be like the ultimate challenge for a character. Reaching like tier 100 is going to be something that, yeah, probably almost no one will accomplish. So this is kind of how I expect this to go. I think it's going to be very difficult to even beat a certain like high tier for most people. So this is like the only way how this can make any sense, to have these tiers in the game and to have these leaderboards for them in the game, so that there's actually a ranking of people that have achieved a certain high tier versus people that have not. But obviously the Nightmare Dungeons should not be everything. I believe there's also a lot of potential for these conquest type leaderboards that we have in Diablo 3 as well, and potentially even like a ladder, like a leveling ladder similar to Diablo 2. So in Diablo 2, there's really only one leaderboard, and this is like who reaches level 99 first, which I guess also does make sense. I wouldn't really mind having something like that in the game. and it just fills up with like the first 1,000 people that reach max level. That would be kind of cool to have. But I believe also these kind of like certain challenges or certain like quests, so to say, that you can accomplish that go a bit out of the ordinary of what you usually do would be really cool to have in Diablo 4. So in Diablo 3, Conquest Racing actually used to be quite big and quite like prestigious back in the early seasons when those were actually hard. These days with power creep, they are laughably easy and mostly completed like on the side by basically anyone. I believe in Diablo 4 with like a fresh game and, you know, probably better balancing, I don't think that's going to be such a big deal. I remember, for example, back in you know, season 2 or season 1 or something, when I managed to get rank 1 on any of these conquests here, I got so many whispers that my game was freezing for minutes because 10,000 people were whispering to me with a congratulations or something like that. And these kind of things. So those are some like kind of fond memories of the past these days. But something like that would be really cool to have in Diablo 4, I believe. So for example, there is a certain challenge to kill all the bosses on Torment 10 in 20 minutes after starting the game. So you have to, you know, make a very fast build that is also strong enough to beat them. And for example, on hardcore, you obviously also have to not die. Or there's another conquest here for a 50 million gold streak. And there's another one for complete Act 1 to 5 in 1 hour, and these kind of things. So there's a bunch of different conquests, and in Diablo 3 they just cycle through every season. And you have these kind of like little challenges that people can hunt for to try to secure a spot on the Conquest leaderboard. And frankly, I believe this is actually going to be an even more interesting like leaderboard system than the Nightmare Dungeon stuff I described. So while personally I really enjoy this like pushing, this, you know, solo creator of pushing in Diablo 3, and I certainly will enjoy Nightmare Dungeon pushing in Diablo 4, I believe. I think that these conquests are probably going to be the real deal when it comes to leaderboards. And the good part is that these can be very creative, they can be very out of the ordinary, you know, they can be something crazy, and they could change every single season as well. So you might have like this kind of like, yeah, typical standard leaderboard format, I guess, you know, leaderboard for the different Nightmare Dungeons for each of the classes, and then maybe like this, you know, level 100, you know, first completion ranking, like the Diablo 2 ladder. And then you can have the conquest, and you can have like, you know, many different conquests, many different leaderboards for certain challenges, you know, accomplished with certain conditions and these kind of things. And those can be really like the thing that keeps it interesting, I guess, over the course of the season for people to work on. Even if they don't hit the number 1 on the leaderboard itself, there might be like a certain reward attached to completing those challenges. You know, maybe, you know, get some actually item reward, some in-game reward, or maybe some cosmetics, who knows. But this would be like a very good motivator to actually get a lot of people to, you know, try their best, you know, push their character to the maximum, try something special once they have done most of the other objectives in a season. From what I get at, for example, with their plans for the season journey and the battle pass, these kind of things, the ceiling of what you can accomplish and what you can hunt for is going to be way higher than in Diablo 3 in terms of, for example, these objectives here in the season journey. Like the season journey these days is also kind of laughable. It's like something you can do with in like one afternoon, basically, if you're really fast. So there's obviously a joke. And in Diablo 4, it seems like there's going to be like more steps and also like more like end game steps, basically. And those can definitely tie into this conquest type leaderboard system, so that maybe there's going to be, you know, these kind of like challenges or these steps in the season journey to achieve some of these conquests. We actually have that in Diablo 3, but as I mentioned, all the conquests these days are horribly outdated. And in Diablo 4, we have the opportunity to just start fresh and actually make like really interesting challenges. So personally, what I just described with the Nightmare Dungeon leaderboards and the Conquest leaderboards are the two systems that I believe make the most sense after, you know, talking about this a lot, thinking about this a lot. And I would also like to hear what are your ideas, what could be done in terms of leaderboards, because you might be able to actually, you know, carry this forward towards the dev at some point. There's one last thing, and that's the PvP leaderboards. So this is something that I have also been discussing, but it seems like we're not going to get anything regarding PvP and leaderboards in that sense, at least on launch or anytime afterwards, I guess. Maybe this would be something for down the line. Maybe they make an expansion and they're gonna try to make some kind of dedicated PvP mode. But I know that some people have been asking for this. I don't think that we're gonna get some official support for it, because of the way that PvP works in Diablo 4, it's very much like, RNG, who you're facing, and in what conditions, with these like PvP zones being just like some open world zones. You don't have like some structured like arena type PvP, for example, with a rating and you queue up against other people of a certain rank or something like this. I mean, we'll see, it might happen, but at least anytime soon I wouldn't really count on it. Anyway, this is what I have to share for now. Let me know what you think. I'll be quite excited to hear any kind of ideas, and hope you enjoyed this video. See you guys next time.